desolate battlefield, 4 brave warriors stand face to face with a demon king in a final battle that will decide the fate of the world. The 4 of them fight together, combining their magic, swordsmanship, and teamwork against the powerful enemy. Despite the demon king's overwhelming strength, they refuse to give up and continue pushing forward. As the battle reaches its climax, the blonde-haired hero finds an opening and drives his sword deep into the demon king's body. Immediately afterward, the group's mage unleashes a massive lightning spell that crashes down on the demon king with incredible force. Having already suffered countless injuries during the battle, the demon king can no longer endure the damage. He lets out one final cry before collapsing heavily onto the ground. For a moment, one of the warriors stare in belief, finding it hard to believe that they actually managed to defeat the demon lord. Sometime later, a grand ceremony is held to honor the warriors who saved the world. The 4 warriors kneels proudly before the king as crowds gather to celebrate their victory over the demon king. To recognize their achievements, the king grants them the title of the 4 emperors, a title reserved only for the greatest mages in the kingdom. One of the warriors, named Ephtal, is completely stunned by the announcement. He knows that throughout history, only people from noble families have ever been allowed to earn the title of emperor. Because of that, he can hardly believe what he is hearing. He admits that the reward is greater than anything he could have ever imagined. The king then walks over to Ephtal personally and addresses him in front of everyone. He explains that while Ephtal may not be the strongest mage in the world, his contributions and achievements are undeniable. For that reason, he has earned the right to bear the title of emperor. From this day forward, he will be known as the Lightning Emperor. Hearing those words causes Ephtal to break down in tears. The crowd erupts into cheers as he struggles to hold back his emotions. After spending 40 years studying and mastering magic, all of his hard work has finally been recognized. Ephtal leaves the ceremony feeling prouder than ever before. For the first time in his life, he feels that all of his sacrifices and efforts have truly paid off. Several years pass after that day, and Ephtal is now an elderly man. One morning, he stands outside and gazes across the open fields in silence. Then a young girl named Merlin approaches him and politely informs him that breakfast is ready and waiting for him inside. About an hour later, Ephtal is seen teaching his students how to maintain a magic circle. The students focus carefully as they try to keep their circles active for as long as possible. During the exercise, one student loses concentration and accidentally causes his magic circle to disappear. Ephtal immediately notices and tells the student not to give up. He explains that maintaining focus is one of the most important skills a mage can learn. If he cannot keep a magic circle active while standing still, then he will never be able to maintain one while chanting spells during battle. Encouraged by Ephtal's words, the boy quickly begins trying again. After some time passes, Ephtal finally brings the exercise to an end. The students release their magic circles and prepare for the next lesson. However, instead of letting them rest, Ephtal immediately suggests moving on to practicing level 4 spells. Before the lesson can continue, Merlin suddenly speaks up. She points out that Ephtal looks exhausted and tells him that he should take a break and get some rest. However, Ephtal simply shrugs off her concern and insists that he is not tired at all. Still, the worried look on Merlin's face causes him to pause for a moment. Seeing her expression reminds him of the day they first met. His thoughts drift back many years to the time shortly after his party defeated the demon lord. During that period, he found Merlin as a baby. She had been left alone after her mother was killed during the conflict involving his party. Remembering that day fills Ephtal with guilt. He quietly wonders whether Merlin would come to hate him if she ever learned the truth about the war and discovered that he had killed so many members of her clan. After a moment, he pushes those thoughts aside and returns his attention to the present. Ephtal tells the students to continue practicing their level 4 magic. Before anyone can begin, Merlin speaks up once again. With a confident smile, she declares that she is ready to start learning level 6 magic. After all, she is one of Ephtal's most talented students. Ephtal cannot help but feel impressed by her confidence and ambition. Even so, he gently tells her that there is no reason to rush ahead so quickly. He assures her that she will learn those higher level spells eventually, but now she should focus on the basic. After training, Merlin heads deep into the forest on her own. She is determined to defeat the beast living inside a nearby cave. In her mind, defeating such a powerful monster would prove that she is Ephtal's greatest student. More importantly, she believes that if she becomes strong enough to teach others years herself, Ephtal will finally be able to stop working so hard and get the rest he deserves. Unfortunately, things go wrong almost immediately as the beast is far stronger than Merlin expected. Before long, she finds herself running through the forest while being chased by a gigantic wolf-like beast. Merlin has already tried level 4 magic on it, but it didn't do any damage at all, which makes her understand she's going to need something more powerful. Realizing that her normal spells are useless, Merlin decides that she has only one option left. She begins chanting a level 6 spell, even though she has never successfully cast one before. To her surprise, the spell actually works as she launches a level 6 lightning bolt right at the monster. The explosion shakes the area and fills the forest with smoke and dust, and Merlin becomes convinced that she has finally won. Then the beast steps out of the smoke completely unharmed. Before Merlin can react, the creature swats her away with tremendous force. She crashes to the ground and struggles to get back up. The huge wolf slowly approaches her and prepares to devour her. At that moment, Merlin begins to accept that she is going to die. Just as the beast is about to attack, Ephtal suddenly appears and saves her at the last second. Ephtal immediately scolds her for entering the forest alone. Ashamed, Merlin begins apologizing over and over again. Ephtal tells her that she has more talent and potential than any of his other students. However, he warns her not to become obsessed with gaining power too quickly. If she rushes forward without building a proper foundation, that power could easily slip through her fingers. As they speak, Merlin suddenly notices that the beast from earlier is still alive and standing right behind Ephtal. However, he doesn't even flinch. Without turning around, he calmly casts a level 10 lightning spell. A massive surge of lightning erupts from his body and instantly destroys the beast. Later that night, Merlin cannot stop talking about how incredible Ephtal looked when he saved her life, but Ephtal eventually tells her to stop talking and go to bed. Merlin finally gives in and starts walking toward her bed. However, she suddenly turns around and sees Ephtal coughing up blood. For several years now, he has been suffering from an incurable disease, and his condition has gradually been getting worse. The worried look on Merlin's face makes Ephtal realize something. She has known about his illness for a long time. That is the real reason she has been pushing herself so hard to become stronger. Merlin quietly asks Ephtal to take better care of himself and to get as much rest as possible. He tells her that he does not have much time left. Because of that, he has no desire to spend his remaining years lying in bed and waiting for the end. Instead, he wants to spend whatever time he has left doing what he loves most. He wants to continue teaching talented students like her and help them become great mages. Ephtal admits that he always wanted to become the strongest mage. Hearing that confuses Merlin because, as far as she knows, he is already the strongest. After all, he was given the title of Lightning Emperor. Ephtal says he understands why she thinks that, but the truth is different. Even though he was the oldest among the emperors and had achieved many great things, there was always a clear gap between him and some of his party members. Because of that, he never truly considered himself the strongest. The next day, one of Ephtal's students knocks on his door and informs him that the Flame Emperor has finally completed his research on magical aptitude. Curious, Ephtal reads through the document. He quickly discovers that the Flame Emperor has found a way to determine a person's magical aptitude. This was something that people believed was impossible, so Ephtal immediately praises him as a genius, wanting to test the new method right away. Ephtal places one of Merlin's hairs inside a test tube and performs the experiment. The colors that appear inside the tube reveal the strength of her magical affinities. The results show that she has S-rank aptitude in both wind and water magic, which is extremely impressive. She also has a B-rank aptitude for fire magic and a C-rank aptitude for earth magic. Since Ephtal has raised Merlin ever since she was a baby, he can tell that the test results are accurate. Before this discovery, students had to spend years studying basic spells from every magical element. Only after enough practice would teachers have a rough idea of what a person's natural talents were. With this new test, however, they can determine someone's aptitude from the moment they are born. This will make training far more efficient and help talented people grow stronger much faster. Ephtal then asks to take the test himself. Merlin immediately says that there is no need because his results would obviously be maxed out. However, Ephtal insists. He explains that even if he could never reach the highest level of magic, he at least wants to know whether he ever had the talent to do so. The test is performed, but the result comes back completely colorless. One of the students checks the instructions questions and explains that a colorless result means the person has no magical aptitude at all. He quickly adds that there must be some mistake because Ephtal is one of the strongest mages alive. For a moment, Ephtal loses his composure. He asks for the test to be performed again. The students repeat it several times, but the outcome never changes. Every single test comes back colorless. As he stares at the results, Ephtal slowly begins to understand something. He remembers how learning magic always took him longer than everyone else. He remembers how the other emperors constantly surpassed him despite all his hard work. For the first time, he realizes the truth. The reason he was always left behind was because he had absolutely no magical aptitude. The realization completely breaks him. He starts coughing heavily, and Merlin rushes over to check on him. Later, she knocks on his door and says she wants to bring him some water, but Ephtal simply tells her to stay out. Lying alone in bed, he reflects on his life. He remembers the dream he carried for decades, reaching the highest level of magic. Now that dream has been completely destroyed. No matter how hard he worked, he never had the talent needed to reach that goal. The frustration becomes overwhelming. He thinks about how pathetic he feels and how all his efforts led nowhere. Suddenly, he suffers a heart attack. At that moment, one of his skills called Second Reincarnation activates. His younger self appears in a strange empty space and finds himself standing before a divine being. Looking around, he comments that more than 50 years have passed and admits that he had completely forgotten about Second Reincarnation. He speaks to the entity and reminds her that this is where they first met after he died in another world long ago. The goddess tells him that the time has finally come for his second reincarnation. Before sending him away, she reminds him that he can choose 2 bonus skills. She recommends a skill called 2 times growth, which would allow him to improve twice as fast. However, Ephtal declines the offer. He says that the magical knowledge he already possesses is enough. If he is given enough time to work hard and improve, then he does not need any special advantages. The goddess is impressed by his answer. She smiles, wishes him good luck, and sends him to a new world. A moment later, Ephtal wakes up in the body of a young boy. He suddenly sits upright as memories begin flooding back into his mind. Still confused, he heads downstairs and is immediately greeted by his mother, who warmly hugs him and tells him that breakfast is ready. As he eats with her, his memories continue returning until everything finally becomes clear. He realizes that this is now his third life. Determined not to waste this opportunity, Ephtal makes a promise to himself. This time, he will master magic no matter what. Unfortunately, he soon discovers that he still has no magical aptitude in this new life. The news crushes his hopes, and he begins to believe that he will once again be limited to level 10 magic, just like before. One day, while lying in a field and thinking about his future, he suddenly hears a loud commotion. Looking up, he sees an enraged dragon flying across the sky, while a group of knights desperately chases after it. Without thinking, Ephtal starts running after them. However, he quickly stops and remembers that he is only 4 years old. There is nothing he can realistically do in his current body. As he watches the dragon fly away, he starts thinking about the level 10 spells he created during his previous life. Almost instinctively, he brings his fingers together, and to his shock, the spell activates instantly. A powerful blast shoots through the sky and strikes the dragon directly, bringing the massive creature down in a single attack. Ephtal stares in disbelief at what just happened, but then the truth finally hits him. Even though he was reborn into a new world, he still possesses the same abilities and power that he had at his peak in his previous life. As time passed, Ephtal spent most of his days studying and researching everything he could. During his research, he discovered that the world he was living in was actually the very same world from his previous life. The only difference was that more than 400 years had passed since then. The next morning, Ephtal's older brother, Frazier, arrives at the house. He brings some money to help pay for the family's daily expenses and household supplies. After that, Frazier notices Ephtal sitting quietly with a difficult magic book in his hands. He is amazed that someone so young is able to read and understand such an advanced book. Ephtal simply replies that he enjoys reading books like these because he finds them incredibly interesting. Hearing that makes Frazier smile. He promises that the next time he visits, he will bring Ephtal even more books as a gift. Frazier is genuinely impressed by Ephtal's love for learning. He says that if their father could see this, he would surely be proud. Hearing those words makes Ephtal curious. He asks when he will finally get the chance to meet his father. Unfortunately, Frazier Frazier explains that their father is extremely busy and rarely has any free time. In fact, ever since Ephtal was born into this world, he has never met his father even once. His father is Duke Orcott, one of the most important people in the Kingdom of Azul and a highly respected figure in the field of magic. Unknown to everyone else, Duke Orcott is also a direct descendant of Ephtal himself from his previous life, when he was known as the Lightning Emperor. Because of that, Ephtal has always been curious about what kind of person his descendant is. Sadly, Ephtal's mother was born without any magical aptitude. Because of that, Duke Orcott's main wife and his other mistresses looked down on her from the very beginning. They even came to see Ephtal as a mistake because he was also born without any magical affinity. The two of them were treated so poorly that they were eventually banished and forced to live in a remote area far away from the rest of the family. As a result, Duke Orcott and his other wives do not even acknowledge Ephtal as part of the family. That is the real reason he has never been allowed to meet his own father. Frazier, however, is the second son born to Duke Orcott's main wife. After learning about the unfair treatment Ephtal and his mother had received, he felt sorry for them and decided to help take care of them whenever he could. Despite everything happening around him, Ephtal honestly does not care very much about his family's problems. As long as he has the chance to study magic again, he is satisfied. Sometime later, the family sits down together to enjoy some tea. During their conversation, Frazier asks Ephtal what he wants to do in the future after spending so much time studying. Without any hesitation, Ephtal excitedly says that as soon as he is old enough, he plans to enroll in the Magic Academy and dedicate himself to studying magic. Before he can finish speaking, however, his mother quickly covers his mouth. She reminds Frazier that Ephtal was born just like her and has absolutely no magical aptitude. Because of that, she believes he will most likely end up studying swordsmanship instead, or perhaps enroll in military school when he grows older. Frazier gets excited after hearing that suggestion. He reminds Ephtal's mother that he himself graduated at the very top of his class in military school, so he believes that path could still lead to a bright future for Ephtal. Frazier admits that he originally chose military school because he wanted to rebel against growing up in a family that was famous for magic. However, looking back on it now, he believes he made the right decision after all. Since he has plenty of free time that day, Frazier decides to teach Ephtal the basics of swordsmanship. The two of them spend the afternoon training together, and Frazier patiently shows him the proper techniques. While practicing, Ephtal remembers something from his previous life. Frazier had always taught him basic education and military science, and he had constantly encouraged him to attend military school instead of pursuing magic. After training for a while, Ephtal finally gathers the courage to speak. He tells Frazier that he truly wants to attend the Magic Academy. Frazier kneels down so he can speak to Ephtal face to face. He gently reminds him that he was born without any magical aptitude. Ephtal says he already knows that. However, he also points out that he is still capable of using magic, and he still possesses mana. Deep down, Ephtal believes that if he can study at the Magic Academy, he might finally discover the secret to breaking past the limits that have held him back for so long. After listening to Ephtal's heartfelt request, Frazier slowly stands up and makes him an offer. He says he is about to cast a spell. If Ephtal can successfully copy the spell in any way at all, then Frazier will personally recommend him for admission into the Magic Academy. In truth, Frazier fully expects Ephtal to fail. He believes that once Ephtal sees the difference between himself and real mages, he will finally understand the limits of his own abilities. Frazier calmly recites a magical incantation before casting a level 2 wind cutter spell. The blade of wind flies forward and cleanly slices through a nearby tree, knocking it over. Ephtal watches the spell and is surprised by how simple it is. Without any hesitation, he recreates the exact same spell. Not only does he copy it perfectly, but he also strengthens it to the level of a level 4 spell. The massive blade of wind tears through the area and destroys several trees in a single attack. Frazier stands there in complete disbelief. He cannot understand how Ephtal, someone who supposedly has no magical aptitude, was able to cast such a powerful spell. Ephtal has no intention of revealing the truth. He cannot explain that all of his magical knowledge and experience came from the memories of his previous life through reincarnation. Ephtal simply says that he is not really sure how he is able to use magic like this. As far as he knows, he can just do it naturally, and he has no real explanation reason for why. He then casually adds that he is even capable of casting magic all the way up to level 10. The moment Frazier hears that, he is so shocked that he immediately faints. Until now, Ephtal had never shown his magic to anyone. However, after seeing Frazier's reaction, he realizes that something must be very different about the current era of magic. His thoughts go back to the day he defeated the dragon with a single lighting spell. The knights who witnessed it could not even believe what they had seen. Instead of thinking it was simply powerful magic, they assumed it had to be a miracle sent by God. While Frazier is still unconscious in bed, Ephtal spends the next few hours thinking about everything he has learned regarding the past 400 years. After putting everything together, he reaches one clear conclusion. The overall level of magic has greatly declined since his previous life. He also realizes that casting spells without chanting an incantation has become extremely rare in this era. That explains why Frazier was so shocked after watching him cast magic so effortlessly. From that moment on, Ephtal decides that keeping his true abilities hidden is the safest choice. Eventually, Frazier jolts awake. Even after opening his eyes, he is still overwhelmed by how easily Ephtal managed to cast that spell. Trying to avoid any trouble, Ephtal calmly tells him to relax. He insists that everything Frazier remembers was nothing more than a strange dream. To Ephtal's surprise, Frazier actually buys the story. Because of that, Ephtal is able to continue training in secret without anyone becoming suspicious. To keep Frazier happy, Ephtal also pretends that he has accepted the idea of attending military school instead of the magic academy. As part of his training, Frazier continues teaching him swordsmanship. During practice, Ephtal is defeated over and over again. However, every loss only motivates him to work even harder. Rather than getting discouraged, he uses each defeat as another reason to become stronger. By the time he reaches the age of 10, Ephtal's swordsmanship has improved dramatically. He easily slices through a massive log with a single swing, showing just how much stronger he has become. As his skills continue improving, Ephtal starts thinking that becoming the world's strongest magic swordsman would not be a bad goal after all. By this point, Frazier has been teaching Ephtal swordsmanship 3 times every week. On this particular day, however, Frazier decides it is finally time to give Ephtal a special lesson. Frazier introduces Ephtal to a huge, muscular man named Moria, who is the former commander of the kingdom of Azul's knights. Without wasting any time, Moria immediately challenges Ephtal to a duel. He tells him not to hold back and to attack with everything he has. As Moria calmly walks toward the center of the training ground, Ephtal finds it difficult to make the first move. Moria's overwhelming aura is so intimidating that it leaves him frozen for a moment. Seeing Ephtal hesitate, Moria assumes he is nothing more than a weak child. He charges straight at him, hoping to end the fight in a single attack. At the last possible second, Ephtal dodges out of the way. Using physical enhancement magic to strengthen his body, he quickly counters with several clean strikes, managing to surprise Moria. As the duel continues, Moria realizes that Ephtal is far more talented than he expected. He can immediately understand why Frazier thought so highly of him. Frazier agrees and explains that even though Ephtal has no magical aptitude, he has incredibly smooth control over the mana flowing through his body. The battle continues, but little by little, Moria begins pushing Ephtal onto the defensive. Realizing he is being overwhelmed, Ephtal decides to use a technique he learned during one of his previous lives. He catches Moria off guard, throws him over his shoulder, and slams him straight into the ground. With that, Ephtal wins the duel. Moria accepts his defeat without complaining. He laughs, pats Ephtal on the head, and tells him that he has successfully passed the test. Frazier then walks over and reveals the truth. He explains that Moria is actually the headmaster of the Azul Military Science Academy. Since Moria was impressed by Ephtal's performance, he has officially passed the entrance test and now has a guaranteed place at the academy. Ephtal is caught completely off guard. Everything happens so quickly that he starts wondering how things even reached this point. A few years later, a heavy rainstorm begins. While everyone stays inside to avoid the rain, they notice Ephtal outside and simply assume he is continuing his swordsmanship training. In reality, Ephtal has gone deep into the forest to secretly practice his level 10 magic. He unleashes a massive lightning spell that crashes into the ground with incredible force. The explosion is so powerful that Frazier mistakes it for a natural lightning strike and immediately rushes into the forest to make sure Ephtal is safe. After confirming that nothing happened to him, Frazier reminds Ephtal that he is now 14 years old. That means once he turns 15, he will officially begin attending the Military Science Academy. The problem is that Ephtal has no desire to go there. He knows that life at the academy will only become more difficult because he still has no magical aptitude. Instead, he plans to leave home as soon as he turns 15 and travel on his own to chase his dream of enrolling in the Magic Academy. Before long, Ephtal's mother receives the news that his father wants to see him. Overjoyed, she hugs him, believing this will finally give Ephtal the chance to meet his father for the very first time. However, Ephtal no longer feels excited about that idea. After being ignored for his entire life, he sees no reason to want a relationship with someone who never acknowledged him. Even so, seeing how happy both his mother and Frazier are makes him change his mind. Rather than running away, he decides to follow through with attending military school. The following day, Ephtal receives a special invitation and travels to his father's mansion. Despite everything that has happened, he is still a little excited to finally meet the man who is also his descendant from his previous life. Unfortunately, the meeting goes exactly the opposite of what he hoped. The moment they stand face to face, Duke Orcott looks down on Ephtal and immediately calls him a disgrace simply because he was born without any magical aptitude. Hearing those words, Ephtal quickly decides that his father is nothing more than a heartless jerk. The Duke then mentions that he already knows Ephtal received a special invitation to the Military Science Academy. At first, Ephtal thinks his father is actually proud of him. However, the Duke's real reason quickly becomes clear. He says he is only happy because Ephtal and his mother will no longer be living under his care. Since Ephtal will now be attending the academy, he will not have to spend another coin supporting them. From now on, they will have to take care of themselves. At that moment, Ephtal realizes that the Duke only invited them to the mansion so he could insult them one last time. Before leaving, the Duke orders one of his sons, a man named Joachim, to fight Ephtal and determine whether he is truly capable of surviving at the Military Science Academy. The moment Joachim hears the order, a wide, unsettling grin spreads across his face. Right before the duel begins, Frazier gives Ephtal one final warning. He tells him that even though Joachim doesn't look all that dangerous, he was the best student in their school when it came to sword fighting. Because of that, he advises Ephtal to surrender if he realizes that he has no chance of winning. Ephtal calmly agrees and says he understands what Frazier means. Ephtal then steps forward to begin the battle, and Joachim immediately tosses a sword toward him. As soon as Ephtal catches it, he notices that the weapon is much heavier than he expected. Joachim explains that it is a hardwood sword, not an ordinary practice weapon. He says that if someone lands the attack properly, the sword is strong enough to crush a person's skull or completely shatter their bones. After saying that, Joachim suddenly puts on a twisted smile and stares directly at Ephtal. He says that Ephtal's mother has brought nothing but shame to the royal family because she gave birth to a child with no talent for magic. He admits that he has always wanted to kill her himself, but since he can't do that anymore, he will just have to settle for killing her son instead. The moment Ephtal hears those words, his expression turns completely cold. He realizes that Joachim and the Duke are easily the most unbearable people he has ever met. What makes him even more annoyed is the fact that these two idiots are actually his own descendants. That thought alone makes him even angrier than before. Without wasting another second, Ephtal rushes straight at Joachim and begins attacking him with his sword. He keeps swinging without giving Joachim any room to breathe, and he is surprised to see that Joachim barely manages to dodge every strike, even though Joachim avoids getting hit. It is obvious that he is struggling to keep up with Ephtal's speed and strength. Joachim is left completely shocked by the amount of power Ephtal possesses. He begins wondering if Ephtal has somehow become possessed because the person standing in front of him feels nothing like the weak boy he knew before. To Joachim, it is as if he is fighting a completely different person. The duel continues for a while as the two keep exchanging blows. Eventually, Joachim raises his sword and tries to block another one of Ephtal's attacks. At that exact moment, Ephtal activates his physical enhancement magic, greatly increasing his strength. He then swings his hardwood sword with overwhelming force, smashing straight through Joachim's defense and caving in his skull. With that single attack, the duel finally comes to an end, and Ephtal is declared the winner. Everyone watching the fight is left frozen in shock because none of them expected Joachim to lose so easily. Before leaving the arena, Ephtal stops for a moment and looks directly at Joachim. In a cold voice, he warns him that if he ever says another disrespectful word about his mother again, he will make sure he dies the next time. Ephtal then walks over to his mother, but he quickly notices that she seems a little afraid of him because of the incredible strength he showed during the duel. He gently reassures her that she has nothing to fear because no matter how strong he has become, he is still the same Ephtal she has always known. After that, Ephtal respectfully bows before the Duke and thanks him for inviting him over. Even though the Duke clearly isn't happy about what happened, he reluctantly wishes Ephtal good luck during his time at military school before letting him leave. Later that evening, Ephtal's mother prepares his favorite meal to celebrate his victory. The two of them are just about to start eating when they suddenly hear someone knocking on the front door. They open it and are surprised to find Moria and Frazier standing outside with a baby in his arms. Once he gets inside, Frazier immediately explains the situation. He says that a rumor has been spreading that the minister's faction is planning to assassinate the young prince while the kingdom's main military force is away fighting on the battlefield. The barbarian attack happened much earlier than anyone expected, so there wasn't enough time to prepare. Because everything happened so suddenly, Frazier decided that Ephtal's house was the safest place he could think of to hide the prince until they figured out what to do next. After hearing that, Ephtal quickly understands the political situation. The previous king of Azul had two sons, and the younger son was far more talented than the older one. Because of that, the younger son became the current king, while the older son became the crown minister instead. Since the current king originally had no male heir, everyone believed that the minister's own son would eventually inherit the throne. However, everything changed when the current king finally had a son of his own. That one event destroyed the minister's plans, which is exactly why his faction now wants the young prince dead before he can inherit the kingdom. Even after figuring all of that out, Ephtal still can't understand one thing. He wonders how the barbarians managed to break through the kingdom's defenses and reach the capital after security had supposedly been strengthened. Frazier believes there is only one person who could have made that possible. He suspects that the Duke is secretly behind everything because if the royal family is overthrown and power changes hands, the Duke would gain more than anyone else. Since returning to the capital is no longer an option, Frazier decides that their only choice is to cross the border and take the prince to the kingdom's main army, where he will be much safer. It is a dangerous journey, but they have no better alternative if they want to keep the prince alive. The next morning, Moria and Frazier finish preparing for the trip and begin saying their goodbyes before leaving. Just then, Ephtal suddenly appears and asks if he can come with them. Moria and Frazier happily accept his offer because they know they will need every bit of help they can get during such a dangerous mission. Although they are grateful to have him with them, it is obvious that Ephtal's mother is heartbroken as she watches her son leave home once again. The three of them begin making their way through the forest while discussing the safest route and planning their next move. In the middle of their conversation, a loud noise suddenly echoes through the trees. Realizing that something is wrong, they immediately decide that the smartest thing to do is leave the forest as quickly as possible before whatever caused the sound catches up to them. However, the moment they reach the edge of the forest, they suddenly stop in their tracks. Waiting for them outside is an even more terrifying sight. The Duke has already arrived with his personal division of battle mages, and they have completely blocked their path. It is immediately clear that they have no intention of letting the prince escape, and they are prepared to take him back no matter what it costs. They immediately think about turning back, but they quickly discover that the path behind them has already been blocked by a wall of fire. That is when they realize the loud sound they heard earlier was actually the Duke's mages setting the entire forest on fire, with flames cutting off one escape route and the Duke's forces blocking the other. They find themselves completely trapped with nowhere left to run. Seeing that they have no easy way out, Frazier decides that the most reasonable option is to try talking things out with the Duke. He steps onto the battlefield and asks the Duke to hear what he has to say before anyone else gets hurt. To Frazier's surprise, the Duke agrees and calmly walks forward to meet him. For a brief moment, Frazier feels relieved because he believes the Duke is actually willing to negotiate. However, the Duke had no intention of talking from the very beginning. Without giving Frazier any warning, he suddenly pulls out a magical tool and strikes him with a bolt of lightning. The attack hits Frazier head-on, knocking him unconscious before he even has a chance to react. Immediately afterward, the Duke gives a signal to the rest of his mages, ordering them to burn everything to the ground. The mages all begin working together, combining their magic to cast a powerful level 6 lightning spell. The enormous spell crashes into the battlefield and completely devastates the entire area, destroying almost everything in its path. Ephtal has no idea whether Frazier managed to survive such a devastating attack or not. As he watches the destruction unfold, the Duke's selfishness and complete disregard for innocent lives only make him angrier and angrier. Every second that passes causes his rage to grow even stronger. Moria notices that Ephtal's expression has become much darker than before and immediately tries to calm him down before he loses control. However, Ephtal ignores his concern and simply tells him that he is about to show them what real magic looks like. Ephtal then calmly walks out onto the battlefield without showing even the slightest hint of fear. Right in front of everyone, he casts a level 9 ice spell with overwhelming power. In an instant, the freezing magic spreads across the battlefield and completely freezes the entire forest. The unbelievable display of magic leaves every single mage, along with the Duke himself, staring in complete shock because none of them have ever witnessed such incredible power before. The moment the Duke realizes that the person standing before him is Ephtal, he immediately orders his mages to stop holding back and show him what they are truly capable of. Without hesitation, the mages combine their strength once again and fire several level 5 explosion arrows straight at Ephtal. The attacks appear to hit him directly, creating a massive explosion that shakes the entire battlefield. The Duke immediately begins celebrating, convinced that no one could possibly survive an attack of that magnitude. But as the smoke slowly clears, everyone is left speechless. Ephtal is still standing exactly where he was before, completely unharmed. It turns out he protected himself by using his always-on magic defense circle, allowing him to block the entire explosion without suffering a single injury. Desperate to stop him, the Duke orders all of his mages to unleash the level 6 lightning spell against Ephtal. As the powerful attack races toward him, Ephtal can't help but find the whole thing insulting. The spell being used against him is the very same legendary lightning magic that was originally named after him. Seeing it used in such a pathetic way only annoys him even more. Without showing even the slightest concern, Ephtal calmly casts a level 7 energy guard spell and effortlessly blocks the entire attack. The massive lightning spell disappears without leaving a scratch on him. Every mage watching is left completely stunned because the level 6 lightning spell is considered legendary magic. They had always believed it was impossible for anyone to block it head-on. After that, a twisted grin slowly spreads across Ephtal's face. He suddenly dashes straight into the army of mages and begins cutting them down one after another without giving them any chance to fight back. His movements are so fast and overwhelming that the mages are completely powerless against him. One after another, they fall before they can even understand what is happening. Realizing they have absolutely no chance of defeating him, the remaining mages abandon the fight and try to run for their lives. Before any of them can escape, Ephtal raises his hand and casts a level 10 lightning spell. The overwhelming magic instantly sweeps across the battlefield, wiping out the entire army in a single attack. When the dust finally settles, only Joachim and the Duke are still alive. Ephtal calmly walks over to the two survivors without showing any emotion. He casually knocks Joachim unconscious before he even has the chance to resist. After that, he turns his attention to the Duke. Looking him straight in the eyes, Ephtal tells him that he has no intention of showing mercy to the kind of man who would sacrifice his own son for his selfish ambitions. Once he finishes speaking, he knocks the Duke unconscious as well. With that, the coup finally comes to an end. Not long afterward, both Joachim and the Duke are publicly executed for their crimes, bringing their rebellion to a permanent end. It doesn't take long before Frazier is discharged from the hospital. As soon as Ephtal hears the news, he immediately goes to check on him. Frazier explains that he only survived because of his family's necklace, which protected him from the fatal attack. The moment Ephtal sees the necklace, he immediately recognizes it as Oberon's guard. It originally belonged to him in the past and had been passed down through the family for many generations before eventually ending up in Frazier's hands. With the Duke gone, Frazier becomes the new head of the household because he risked his own life to protect the crown prince during the attack. On top of that, the kingdom begins stripping the Duke of all his noble titles and honors, completely erasing his legacy after everything he had done. Some time later, Ephtal decides to show Frazier and Moria the true extent of his magical power, as they watch him demonstrate one incredible spell after another. Both of them are left deeply impressed by what they see. Even so, they warn him that he should keep his true strength a secret secret because if the rest of the world ever found out how powerful he really is, it could throw the entire world into chaos. They become even more surprised when Ephtal reveals that he still plans to attend magic school. Both Frazier and Moria think he has already become far too powerful to learn anything there. But Ephtal explains that raw power isn't everything. He wants to study magic properly so he can learn how to control his abilities and use every spell to its fullest potential. After hearing his reasoning, Frazier and Moria fully support his decision. With that, Ephtal takes another important step forward on his journey to master the path of magic. By the time Ephtal turns 15, he's packed up and ready to leave for the Magic Academy, and it's written all over his mother's face how much she's going to miss him. She pulls him into one last tight embrace before letting go, and both Moria and Frazier wave him off as he heads out. Walking away, Ephtal makes a quiet promise to himself that this time he's going to push past every limit his talent has placed on him. After traveling for a while, he spots a tea house nearby and decides to stop in for a break. While sitting with his drink, he notices a scene unfolding across the room. A commoner is practically on his knees praising a mage named Master Edwards, telling him what an honor it is to have someone of his reputation make the trip out to the countryside, and expressing hope that he'll show the locals what real magic looks like. Edwards responds by telling the man to shut up, explaining that having a conversation with him is a waste of his time. He then proceeds to remind the man that at only 20 years old, he has already reached a rank adventurer status, while the man kneeling before him is over 50 and still sitting at C rank. He makes sure the man understands that comparison is meant to illustrate exactly how wide the gap between them is. The man apologizes for the intrusion and then mentions, perhaps hoping to soften the mood, that he and the others have already prepared a banquet in Edward's honor. Edwards shuts that down immediately, telling him there's no chance he's attending because he has far more important things to deal with involving his demon slave. Seeing the way Edward treats the young slave girl almost makes Ephtal feel sick. Watching it happen reminds him of Merlin. If he hadn't taken Merlin in when he did, she could have easily ended up becoming a slave just like this girl. Just thinking about that possibility leaves a bitter feeling in his heart. Just then, a man suddenly comes running into the area in a panic. He loudly warns everyone that a massive orc has suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Hearing that, Ephtal quickly runs outside and sees the giant orc standing in the middle of the road, casually eating pumpkins from a merchant's carriage. The moment everyone lays eyes on the monster, panic spreads through the crowd. The villagers immediately begin screaming and running in fear, convinced that they're all going to die. However, before the panic can get any worse, the commoner mage from earlier shouts for everyone to stay calm. He reminds the crowd that Master Edward, and a rank adventurer, is standing right there with them. Edward happily accepts all the praise and confidently tells everyone that an orc like this is only a B-class monster. According to him, defeating something at that level should be effortless for a rank adventurer like himself. Hearing those confident words immediately lifts everyone's spirits, and the crowd begins placing all of their hopes on Edward, believing he'll finish the battle in no time. Edward then starts chanting the spell for a level 4 fire spell. Once the chant is complete, he releases a powerful blast of flames straight at the orc. The spell crashes into the monster and creates a huge explosion, filling the area with smoke and fire. Edward smiles confidently, while the villagers also believe the fight is already over. However, once the smoke finally clears, everyone is left completely stunned. The orc is still standing there without a single scratch on its body. For the first time, Edward's confidence begins to disappear. He finally realizes that this isn't an ordinary orc at all. It's actually a berserker orc, one of the strongest and most dangerous types of orcs that exist. Edward realizes he has absolutely no chance of defeating it, so instead of continuing the fight, he immediately turns around and runs away. As he escapes, he quickly casts a magical barrier around everyone else, trapping all of the villagers inside with the berserker orc. Edward has no intention of saving anyone. His plan is to use the trapped villagers as bait so the monster stays occupied while he makes his own escape. In his mind, someone as important as himself shouldn't die such a miserable death. The terrified crowd immediately rushes toward the glowing barrier and desperately pounds on it, begging Edward to let them out, no matter how loudly they scream or plead for help. Edward completely ignores them because he feels his life is more important. Watching all of this disgusts Ephtal to his very core. He can't believe someone who calls himself an rank adventurer would abandon innocent people so easily. Without any hesitation, Ephtal casually uses his own magic to dispel the barrier in an instant. The barrier immediately shatters, leaving everyone speechless. The villagers stare at Ephtal in complete shock, and before he realizes it, all of their attention has shifted toward him. Ephtal quickly realizes he may have overdone things a little. He never wanted to attract this much attention to himself. At the same time, he knows he couldn't just stand there and do nothing while innocent people were left to die. After thinking for a moment, Ephtal quickly comes up with a plan. He decides he'll first cast a level 3 fire spell to distract everyone watching. Then, while everyone's attention is focused on that attack, he'll secretly finish the Berserker Orc with a powerful level 9 spell without anyone noticing what really happened. Ephtal begins by casting the level 3 fire spell. The moment the spell forms, everyone watching is shocked that such a young boy is capable of using level 3 magic. Their disbelief only grows as they watch the spell race toward the Berserker Orc. However, before Ephtal even gets the chance to secretly follow up with his planned level 9 spell, something completely unexpected happens. His level 3 fire spell alone is enough to defeat the Berserker Orc, bringing the massive monster down on the spot. Edward watches the entire scene in complete disbelief. He can't understand how Ephtal's level 3 spell managed to defeat the monster when his own level 4 spell couldn't even leave a scratch on it. The old mage from earlier quickly explains that Ephtal didn't simply cast a normal level 3 spell. He forged and refined the magic before releasing it, greatly increasing its power until it became comparable to a level 5 spell. Hearing that explanation makes Ephtal realize that Edward isn't nearly as skilled as he originally believed. Something as basic as forging and refining magic should have been second nature to an experienced rank adventurer. Yet Edward never even bothered to do something so simple. Ephtal realizes he ended up drawing far more attention than he expected as everyone around him is staring in his direction. But a few seconds later, he notices they aren't actually looking at him. They're all staring at the giant flaming monster behind him because they think it smells delicious. While everyone is distracted, he quietly slips through the crowd and decides it's time to leave. Before walking away, he calls out to Edward one last time. He tells him that he should show more respect to his elders because the old man standing beside him knows far more about magic than he ever will. Ephtal also reminds Edward that trapping people inside that barrier was basically attempted murder, and someone who tries to kill others has no right to own slaves. He tells Edward to free the demon girl and turn himself in. Seeing how kind and calm Ephtal is makes the demon girl look at him in a completely different way. As Ephtal continues on his journey, she quietly follows behind him for a while. Eventually, Ephtal notices her and turns around to ask what she wants. The demon girl nervously asks if he will become her master, completely catching Ephtal by surprise. She then drops to her knees and begs him, explaining that if nobody claims her, she'll be arrested as an escaped slave. Ephtal knows that now the bond with her former master has been broken. She's technically free, but that also means any strange or cruel person could force her into becoming their slave. She could even end up with someone much worse than Edward. Since she's a demon, Ephtal wonders how she became a slave in the first place. She explains that after her clan lost a war against the human nations long ago, humans enslaved them, and ever since then, her people have lived as slaves. Hearing her story makes Ephtal realize that once someone becomes a slave, escaping that life is almost impossible. The demon girl also reveals that she's related to Merlin, the headmistress of the Magic Academy. Hearing that makes Ephtal's eyes go wide with shock. It's the same Merlin he over 400 years ago, and she's now the headmistress of the academy. Realizing how successful she's become fills him with pride. Then he remembers that demons live for a very long time, so it makes sense that she's still alive. Ephtal then asks the demon girl for her name, and she tells him it's Anastasia. Knowing she's one of Merlin's relatives, Ephtal can't bring himself to leave her behind or let her continue suffering. In the end, he agrees to become her master. They reach the town before sunset, and Anastasia asks why they stopped there. Ephtal explains that the Magic Academy's entrance exam will be held there the next day. Anastasia is surprised to hear that he's enrolling as a student, especially since he's already so powerful. Putting that aside, Ephtal suggests they find an inn to rest for the night, but before that, they need to get something to eat. A short time later, they arrive at a fancy restaurant. The waiters seem unsure about serving Ephtal because it's rare to see someone bring a slave into such an expensive place. Still, they decide to seat him. him. As they walk in, Ephtal notices the other nobles giving him dirty looks for having the nerve to bring a slave into such a high-class restaurant. After sitting down, Ephtal notices that Anastasia is sitting on the floor instead of using the chair. She explains that slaves are supposed to kneel beside their masters so they can respond to their needs at any moment. Ephtal simply tells her to forget everything she learned as a slave and sit in the chair instead. The moment Anastasia sits down, one of the waiters walks over and tells Ephtal that it's against the restaurant's rules for slaves to sit on the chairs because the place is meant only for high-class guests. He even starts to think Ephtal is too poor to afford a meal there. But everything changes the moment Ephtal puts 3 dragon drops on the table, leaving the waitress speechless. Ephtal thinks this is not enough, so he reveals the rest of the dragon drops hidden beneath his jacket. The waiter instantly realizes that only 1 dragon drop is worth 500 gold coins, so he changes his attitude, quickly apologizes, and tells the rest of the staff to serve Ephtal and his guest the best meal on the menu. When the food finally arrives, Ephtal is ready to eat, but he notices that Anastasia is still too nervous to touch her food because she's a slave. Ephtal once again tells her to forget about all of that and simply enjoy the meal. He admits that she has probably been treated badly for most of her life, and it's even possible that one day he might hurt her feelings without realizing it. If that ever happens, he tells her she has every right to get angry at him and tell him. Anastasia is honestly shocked that someone would treat her with so much kindness and fairness, and she happily agrees. The next morning, they head to the Magic Academy to register for the entrance exam. Anastasia also thanks Ephtal for buying her new clothes, and Ephtal tells her they look great on her. Thinking about it some more, Ephtal suggests that Anastasia should take the entrance exam as well. If she passes, she could get a good job in the future. Anastasia isn't very confident that she'll be able to do it, but Ephtal is sure she'll be fine. He can sense that she has more magical talent than almost anyone else there. After all, she's one of Merlin's descendants. Not long after, the head instructor steps forward and announces that the first stage of the entrance exam will be a massive battle royale. The contestants are told that they must fight until only 5 people remain. They are allowed to use any method they want as long as they can knock their opponents out of the ring. The supervisor watching over the exam is actually a B-rank adventurer who has been in charge of this part of the entrance exam every year. However, after watching the exam for so many years, the supervisor has rarely seen any students who truly stand out. Because of this, he doesn't have high expectations for this year's group of applicants and expects the battle to be no different from the others he has seen before. The battle royale begins shortly after, and the contestants immediately start fighting. The usual strategy is to take out the weakest students as quickly as possible before they become a problem later. Because of this, several students quickly gang up on Ephtal and Anastasia, assuming that the two of them will be easy targets. However, the supervisor is left completely shocked when Ephtal manages to take down 9 students all by himself. He can tell that Ephtal is using some kind of physical enhancement magic, but he is still surprised that someone so young is capable of using it at such a high level. Anastasia then decides to join the fight and casts a level 3 wind spell. The other students are left stunned because a level 3 spell is considered an advanced spell for someone their age. Ephtal notices that Anastasia had to use an incantation before casting her spell, so he asks her why she needs to do that. Anastasia is confused by the question because she doesn't believe it is even possible to cast magic without using an incantation. Ephtal then decides to prove her wrong. He begins casting 4 simultaneous level 4 wind spell without using an incantation, leaving Anastasia and the other students completely shocked. The powerful spell immediately knocks the rest of the contestants out of the ring, ending the battle in an instant. The supervisor is left in complete disbelief at what he has just witnessed. He never expected to see someone as young as Ephtal use such powerful magic without even needing an incantation. With all their opponents defeated, the supervisor officially announces that Ephtal and Anastasia have won this round of the entrance exam. Next up is the written exam. Ephtal sits down and looks at the test paper, but he quickly finds the entire thing extremely tedious. There are simply too many questions, and he feels like the exam is taking forever. However, Ephtal doesn't find the actual questions difficult at all. In his previous life, he had already mastered the study of magic, so the knowledge being tested is something he already knows very well. About an hour later, the written exam finally comes to an end. Ephtal lets out a sigh of relief relief and tells Anastasia how glad he is that he has finally finished answering all those questions. However, Anastasia suddenly informs him that he wasn't actually supposed to answer every question on the exam. He was only supposed to choose one question that was most related to his own field of study and answer that one. Hearing this, Ephtal is completely shocked. He can't believe that he spent all that time answering every single question when he only needed to answer one. The exams are eventually scored, and the school authorities are left completely stunned when they see Ephtal's results. He scores an incredible 958 points, making it the highest score ever recorded in the history of the exam. The dean immediately becomes suspicious and assumes that Ephtal must have cheated somehow. However, before he can take any action, the supervisor from the Battle Royale walks into the room. The supervisor explains that during the Battle Royale, Ephtal managed to cast 4 level 4 spells in parallel, based on the incredible skill Ephtal displayed during the battle. The supervisor believes that it is highly unlikely that he would need to cheat on a simple written exam. The dean then starts thinking about Ephtal's name. He remembers that the infamous Lightning Emperor also had the exact same name. This makes him wonder if Ephtal could somehow be the reincarnation of the legendary mage. A few days later, all the applicants gather around the school's notice board to find out whether they have been accepted into the Magic Academy. Ephtal carefully looks through the list, trying to find his name. While he is still searching, Anastasia suddenly runs up and throws her arms around him. She excitedly tells Ephtal that she has been accepted into the special magic class. However, Anastasia quickly realizes that she is hugging Ephtal in front of all the other students. She immediately becomes embarrassed when she notices everyone staring at her. Ephtal simply congratulates her before returning his attention to the notice board. Ephtal continues searching for his name, but no matter how many times he looks through the list, he can't find it anywhere. Eventually, he realizes that his applicant number isn't even on the list. Ephtal immediately assumes that he has been rejected. He begins wondering if the school secretly conducted some kind of aptitude test without telling him and rejected him because he failed it. Anastasia becomes angry and says that she is going to complain to the school about the situation. However, Ephtal quickly calls her back and tells her not to do that because it would only embarrass him even more. Just then, the two of them notice another notice board nearby. This one is different from the regular acceptance list and appears to be reserved for special announcements. When Ephtal looks at it, he suddenly sees his own name written there. He discovers that the school has classified him as a special elite student. Ephtal isn't really sure what being a special elite student means, but he is mostly just relieved that he has actually been accepted into the school. A little while later, Anastasia explains that being a special elite student comes with many special benefits. Ephtal will receive free tuition and even get free food while attending the academy. However, Ephtal isn't very impressed by these benefits. He quickly realizes that these perks are probably just part of the school's public image and a way to show everyone how important their special elite students are, instead of being excited about all the attention. Ephtal starts worrying that being treated as a special student might actually cause him more trouble than it is worth. After all, he doesn't want everyone watching his every move or constantly trying to figure out who he really is. Ephtal already has his own goal in mind. He plans to make use of the school's massive library while keeping as low a profile as possible. His main objective is to search through the Academy's knowledge and research materials in secret. Ephtal hopes that by studying everything he can find, he might finally discover a breakthrough related to magical aptitude. But now that Ephtal has been given such a high ranking, he starts to wonder if he will actually be able to keep a low profile. With the school already paying so much attention to him, staying unnoticed may be harder than he originally expected. As Ephtal and Anastasia walk through the school grounds, Ephtal suddenly spots someone familiar. The moment he sees her, he immediately recognizes her as Merlin. Merlin has grown up a lot since the last time Ephtal saw her, but there is no doubt in his mind that it is really her. Ephtal knows that Merlin is very familiar with him, so if she gets a good look at him, she could easily recognize who he really is. This could become a huge problem because Merlin might publicly reveal that Ephtal is actually the Lightning Emperor. Ephtal quickly hides behind a wall and tries to avoid being seen by Merlin. He knows that the safest thing he can do is get away from her as quickly as possible. So Ephtal grabs Anastasia and tries to leave the area before Merlin notices him. However, Ephtal soon realizes that hiding from Merlin won't be enough. Even though she doesn't see him directly, Merlin is still able to sense his energy. Merlin suddenly stops and realizes that Ephtal must be somewhere nearby. She begins searching the area, following the energy she can feel. Ephtal tries to get away as quickly as possible, but Merlin eventually catches up to him. She runs up to him and immediately asks him a direct question. She wants to know if he is somehow related to the Lightning Emperor. Ephtal immediately denies knowing anything about the Lightning Emperor and refuses to give Merlin any reason to suspect him. Without wasting any more time, he quickly runs away with Anastasia before Merlin can ask him anything else. Once they finally make it outside, Ephtal turns to Anastasia and asks her if she was able to recognize Merlin. Anastasia admits that she is actually embarrassed to say this, but she has never even met Merlin before. Ephtal is surprised by this, but Anastasia explains that she and Merlin are only very distant relatives. Because of how distant their family connection is, they have never had the chance to meet each other. Ephtal then realizes that this actually makes sense. After all, Anastasia and Merlin don't look very similar, so it would be understandable if Anastasia had no idea what Merlin looked like. A while later, the new students gather for their orientation. During the event, Merlin is brought forward as the headmistress of Altina Academy to give a speech welcoming the new students. As Merlin finishes her speech, Ephtal finally understands why she is here. He realizes that she isn't a teacher at the academy, meaning he won't have to worry about running into her again anytime soon. However, just when Ephtal thinks everything is going to be fine, the dean suddenly calls him forward in front of everyone and introduces him as one of the academy's special elite students. The moment Merlin hears Ephtal's name and realizes that it is the same name as her former master's, she immediately becomes certain that this is actually him. Ephtal quickly realizes that his plan to live a quiet life has completely fallen apart. Later, just as expected, all the girls in the class immediately surround Ephtal. They are fascinated by him because he is a special elite student, and they think his status makes him incredibly cool. Anastasia watches all the girls surrounding Ephtal and starts to feel a little jealous. However, before things can go any further, Merlin suddenly walks over to Ephtal and places his exam score sheet on his desk. She has a clearly angry look on her face. The girls immediately notice that something serious is happening, so they quickly leave and give Merlin and Ephtal some privacy to talk. Merlin begins by asking Ephtal if he is familiar with the concept of reincarnation. Ephtal immediately wonders if Merlin has already figured out his true identity. However, he decides to play dumb and pretends that he has no idea what she is talking about. Merlin then explains why she is suspicious. Based on the answers Ephtal gave during the written exam, she realizes that his understanding of magic theory is correct. However, there is something strange about the knowledge he displayed. Ephtal's magic theory is actually based on ideas that were used more than 400 years ago. This is why his answers were so difficult to understand at first. Ephtal immediately realizes that he made a serious mistake. He had become careless and accidentally revealed knowledge that should no longer exist in the modern era. He knows that this small mistake could completely ruin his plans and expose his true identity. So, Ephtal decides to make his lie even more convincing. He tells Merlin that the Lightning Emperor once had a secret lover and secretly had a child with her. The Lightning Emperor personally trained this child and taught him everything he knew about magic. However, the child was kept hidden from the public and raised in a distant village so that he could live a quiet life away from the attention surrounding the Lightning Emperor. Ephtal then claims that he is a descendant of that secret child. He introduces himself as Ephtal Orcott XIII. Ephtal secretly apologizes to Merlin in his mind for lying to her, but he knows that this is how things have to be for now if he wants to protect his identity. After hearing this story, Merlin feels slightly sad that her master never told her about such an important secret. She can't believe that the Lightning Emperor had an entire secret family that she knew nothing about. However, her sadness quickly turns into excitement. Merlin becomes eager to find out whether one of Ephtal's descendants could actually be stronger than she is. She then informs Ephtal that the academy will soon be holding mock battles for the students. Merlin asks him if he would be willing to fight against her. The moment Ephtal hears this, he immediately shudders. He knows that fighting Merlin could be extremely dangerous for his plan. plans. If he battles her seriously, there is a good chance that he will reveal how powerful he really is. That would only draw even more attention to him. The most logical choice would be to refuse Merlin's challenge and avoid the battle altogether. However, Ephtal's heart tells him otherwise. Despite knowing the risk, Ephtal eventually accepts Merlin's challenge. Deep down, he is actually excited about the opportunity. After all, Merlin has spent the last 400 years developing her magic and growing stronger. Ephtal can't help but wonder just how powerful she has become during all that time. News about Ephtal's battle with Merlin quickly spreads throughout the Magic Academy. Even though the students know Ephtal is the Academy's special representative, most of them still do not believe he can defeat Merlin because of how legendary she is. Ephtal only agrees to this mock battle because he wants to see how much Merlin has improved after spending the last 400 years studying magic. That afternoon, the time for the mock battle finally arrives. Ephtal and Merlin stand across from each other as the entire academy gathers to watch. Most of the students cheer for Merlin, but Ephtal still has a few supporters. Seeing other students cheer for her master makes Anastasia feel a little jealous. As the battle begins, Ephtal calmly says he wants to start with something simple. Without saying a single incantation, he raises his hand and fires a level 6 fireball at Merlin. The attack leaves every student and teacher watching completely shocked. A moment later, Merlin calmly emerges out of the flames without a single scratch. Ephtal smiles after realizing she blocked the attack with a level 7 perfect wall. Seeing a young boy cast a level 6 spell so easily and without an incantation makes Merlin believe Ephtal's story even more. Even with the odds stacked against her, Merlin refuses to go down without making Ephtal work for it. She launches a level 6 flare burst spell, and Ephtal answers it with the same perfect wall Merlin herself had cast earlier. Fighting her, he can't quite hide how much he's enjoying this, because it's the first time he's witnessed level 6 magic being used since his reincarnation. Merlin catches the grin on his face, and it irritates her enough to leap into the air and fire another level 6 flare burst straight at him. She explains between attacks that high-level spells normally require significant time to construct properly, but having learned directly from the Lightning Emperor, she was able to master casting without any incantation at all. Ephtal decides to push her further and throws out a level 7 ice spell that freezes every one of her flames solid. Merlin is caught off guard, not expecting him to have ice magic in reserve, and then he surprises her again by launching an evil frost attack directly at her. He watches with genuine curiosity to see how she'll handle it, and she makes him proud by stopping it cleanly with a perfect wall. He immediately chains several more level 7 evil frost spells one after another, and she blocks those two without falling apart. Then Ephtal casts a heavily refined icing titan at her, and this time the pressure is noticeably different. Merlin struggles to hold against it. Ephtal points out that her casting still has imperfections, and that even when the raw magical output is equal, a refined technique will break through an imperfect defense. Merlin hears that, and something shifts in her expression. It sounds exactly like something the Lightning Emperor would say to her mid-battle, always pointing out her flaws in real time rather than waiting until after. The memory hits her somewhere deep, and instead of breaking her focus, it does the opposite. She locks in completely, shifts into multicasting, and layers a level 7 perfect wall until the icing titan shatters against it. The crowd watching has no words. Ephtal is genuinely impressed, but he knows multicasting on that scale drains the caster fast, so he charges in immediately to land the finishing blow before she can recover. But Merlin suddenly vanishes. She reappears behind him and releases a level 6 flare burst with an unusually wide blast radius, and everyone watching assumes that's the end of Ephtal. Merlin allows herself a small smirk, then senses him directly behind her. He had already read her intention to attack from the rear and prepared a teleportation spell of his own before she even made her move. Merlin tells Ephtal that he uses the exact same techniques as the Lightning Emperor. To her, seeing someone with the same name and the same fighting style is both confusing and frustrating. Even so, Ephtal looks so much like him that it also brings back many old memories. Because of that, Merlin cannot help but smile as she looks at him. After that, Merlin tells Ephtal that she is about to use her strongest spells against him. She says that if he can survive everything she throws at him, she will finally admit defeat. Ephtal calmly accepts her challenge without showing any fear. Merlin immediately begins casting a level 8 Thor's hammer spell. As Ephtal watches her prepare prepare the attack, he honestly looks a little disappointed because he expected her secret spell to be stronger than just a level 8 spell. Merlin notices the look on his face but keeps her confident smile. She tells him not to underestimate her just because of the spell's level. A moment later, Merlin releases the attack and the giant bolt of lightning races straight toward Ephtal. He quickly dodges it with ease, but he still looks confused because the attack seems no different from a normal Thor's hammer spell. He starts wondering why Merlin was so confident if that was all she planned to do. Then Ephtal takes a closer look and finally notices something unexpected. While she was casting with her right hand, Merlin had secretly been casting another spell with her left hand at the very same time. The second lightning attack suddenly shoots toward Ephtal from another direction, but he still reacts quickly enough to dodge it before it can hit him. After avoiding the attack, Ephtal admits that the move was impressive. He praises Merlin for thinking ahead, but he also tells her that he still saw the attack coming before it reached him. However, Ephtal is suddenly left in complete shock when he realizes Merlin has been casting a third spell with her left foot as well. The third attack rushes toward him almost instantly, forcing him to barely dodge it at the last possible second. After escaping the attack, Ephtal admits that he had no idea Merlin had a trick like that hidden up her sleeve. Before he even has time to recover, Ephtal is shocked once again. He realizes Merlin is now casting 4 level 8 spells at the same time, using one spell with each of her 4 limbs. Instead of becoming worried, Ephtal suddenly smiles with excitement as he realizes just how much Merlin has grown over the past 400 years. She has improved far more than he expected. Merlin slowly rises into the air while continuing to gather more and more magic. As he watches her, Ephtal admits that this is something he never had the chance to see in his previous life. Watching Merlin perform such an incredible technique reminds him why she has always been his favorite student. Deciding that it is finally his turn to respond, Ephtal prepares to use his own original level 10 lightning spell. Merlin finishes gathering all of her magic before finally launching her attack toward him. Without showing any panic, Ephtal calmly responds by releasing his original level 10 lightning spell. The moment both spells collide, the entire arena is covered in a blinding flash of light that makes it impossible for anyone to see what is happening. Merlin watches the clash in complete disbelief. She cannot believe that Ephtal is powerful enough to cast a spell capable of completely overpowering her Thor's hammer attack. In her mind, something like this should be impossible for anyone except the Lightning Emperor himself. Then, without giving anyone time to react, Ephtal suddenly uses his magic cancel technique. In an instant, every trace of lightning throughout the arena disappears, and Merlin slowly falls back down to the ground as her magic completely vanishes. The students and teachers watching the battle are left with their mouths hanging open. Nobody knows what to say after witnessing such an unbelievable exchange of magic. After Merlin lands on the ground, she looks directly at Ephtal and quietly asks him if he is the Lightning Emperor reborn. This time, Ephtal does not deny the truth. He admits that he really was reincarnated. After saying that, he walks over to Merlin and gently pats her on the head, telling her how proud he is of everything she has accomplished over the last 400 years. The moment Merlin hears those words, she can no longer hold back her emotions. Tears begin running down her face as she tells Ephtal how much she has missed him all these years. Seeing the two of them together makes Anastasia feel a little jealous, so she quickly runs over and stands beside Ephtal. When Merlin notices Anastasia, she immediately assumes Ephtal somehow ended up with a slave, even though he is supposed to be a student. Ephtal quickly clears up the misunderstanding by explaining that Anastasia simply ran into some trouble, so he decided to take care of her until she had somewhere safe to stay. Anastasia nervously steps forward and politely introduces herself to Merlin, saying that it is nice to meet her. Merlin warmly smiles and returns the greeting. Since Ephtal chose to keep Anastasia by his side, Merlin believes he must have had a good reason for doing so and does not question it any further. However, it does not take long before a large group of students comes running toward Ephtal. They all begin asking him to become their new magic teacher, while others beg him to show off more of his incredible magic during future demonstrations and conferences. Ephtal cannot even get upset about their behavior because he expected everyone to react like this after revealing so much of his power during the battle. After the crowd finally calms down, Merlin asks Ephtal why he decided to come to this academy in the first place. Ephtal chooses not to tell her the full truth. Instead, he simply says that that he came because he wants to study magic. Merlin accepts his answer without doubting him and suggests that the three of them leave before the crowd becomes even bigger. With that, they quickly run off together. A few hours later, Merlin brings Ephtal back to the mansion where he used to live hundreds of years ago. When they arrive, Ephtal is deeply touched after seeing that Merlin has carefully looked after the mansion for the past 400 years, keeping it in excellent condition all this time. After showing them around, Merlin tells Ephtal to wait there while she goes to finish some paperwork. Both Ephtal and Anastasia look confused and ask what kind of paperwork she is talking about. Merlin happily explains that she plans to file documents saying that both Ephtal and Anastasia are her adopted children as well as her personal apprentices. As she talks, she gets completely carried away and starts imagining what their new school life will be like together. Ephtal quickly tells Merlin to slow down and explain exactly what she is talking about. Merlin calms herself and explains that she is going to use her authority as the head of Altina Magic Academy to allow Ephtal to enroll there immediately. Merlin becomes more and more excited as she imagines going to school with Ephtal again. She happily talks about studying together in the library, eating lunch together every day, and spending time with him around the academy just like they used to. After thinking about it for a moment, Ephtal realizes that enrolling at Altina Magic Academy would not be a bad idea. It would allow him to continue studying all the magic he wanted to learn as a student without having to hide so much, especially since Merlin is the head of the academy and already knows his biggest secret. In the end, he tells Merlin that he thinks it is a great idea. He walks over and gives her a warm hug while thanking her for everything she has done. Watching the two of them hug makes Anastasia feel a little jealous once again, but she decides to let it slide just this once. That was episode 6. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen. I heard that you addicted to them sands now, girl.